Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be providing my book review of the book Spinneret by Timothy Zahn. This is one of Timothy Zahn's earliest science fiction novels that he wrote. This was written published at least in 1985. Timothy Zahn started writing full time in about 1980, and he was just trying to just get science fiction stories out, and so the 80s was a very early time where he was just creating original stories. He didn't do many series. He had the Cobra books, but that was like a novel that he wrote just as a single novel. Then he wrote another one later and another one. But he wasn't writing series. This is just a standalone science fiction that he wrote. And most of his novels during this time were exclusively for Baen Publishing, which was one of the premier science fiction publishers at the time. I love Baen as a publisher. I think they do a good job. But I have read 30 of his books so far. I have read 16 of his Star Wars novels. I have loved just about every one of them. One of them I thought was mediocre, but other than that, I've loved just about all of them. He's one of the best media tie-in authors, if not one of the best Star Wars authors in the business. But also, I've read 14 of his original novels, spanning from the Cobra series, which I enjoyed a lot of those books. I've read some of his Sybil's War trilogy, which was fine. I really, really, really loved his Conquerors trilogy, which I thought was superb. And then I also read some of his standalone books, some of the ones that like are upper echelons are Angel Mass and Icarus Hunt and Icarus Plot, which was a sequel, and then Manta's Gift, which I read earlier this year, is my favorite science fiction novel of all time. It's a brilliant book. So, needless to say, Timothy Zahn is not only a science fiction author that I love, he's for sure in my top two. I don't know whether I like him or Kevin Anderson more, but he's certainly in my top two. So I've enjoyed reading his books. And I picked this up hoping to be entertained. And unfortunately, out of the 30 books that I've read by Timothy Zahn, this is the lowest book on the list for me. And that's really hard to say. I have not read a book that I've actively said bad until now. So this is going to be a negative review, unfortunately, but I have a few positives about the book, a few positives that I can stroke. First of all, this book has some interesting ideas regarding politics. Timothy Zahn is very much apolitical in his writing. He's very careful that he never ticks off anyone of any religion or any political belief or anything, and yet he includes a political B-plot in this story between the conservative military leadership on this colony and also the migrants who are more liberal. And he handles this in probably the best way that an author can. A lot of authors would just give the liberal side of the viewpoint, portray the conservatives as pure evil. And then there are a few authors who would go the opposite view, make the conservatives the good guys and make those immigrants the bad guys. But in publishing right now, most people would take the liberal side. Timothy Zahn instead portrays both of them pretty equally as actually people who are looking out for what's best. They just have different ways of doing it, but they each have flaws in the way that they're trying to present their argument and in the way they're trying to execute what they're doing. They're both trying to do what's best. They just have different methods of trying it. And so it's written in such a way that you can have a political dialogue without ticking anyone off. I don't think anyone will read this book and get mad at Zahn for his political viewpoints in here. So that's why I really like the way he writes politics here. There's also some themes about how you set up a government, how you set up a military-industrial complex, how you have diplomacy between a settlement and the main colony, or in Earth. It's a settlement of Earth. How does that work? Should it just be from the U.S., or should it be part of the whole UN, part of the whole pole of Earth? There's a really intense political dialogue throughout the book, particularly in the first half of the book, that I really enjoyed. Another interesting element is that this book is science fiction. A lot of Timothy Zahn's novels are space operas. Quite a lot of them, or at least military science fiction, and it's more about the military conquering the galaxy type thing. So he usually has space opera or military science fiction. Rarely does, and this book, of course, is military based, but this book is really science fiction. The scientists have a forefront in this book, and the science information is all present, and you will learn a lot. There are things like Dyson spheres and things like skyhooks, things I knew from other things that I'd read, but I learned more about them in the way that Timothy Zahn presents them. There's scientific contraptions that he talks about, the ways that we would trade scientific technology and information. You would think, no, you're only dealing with goods. No, information is actually tradable in a galactic economy. And so it's really interesting the way that Zahn handles all of that, and you learn a lot about science through this book, even though some of it's kind of far-fetched. And of course, there are aliens, which is, not really scientific. But still, it's a very science-based book, and so you will learn a lot. That's really where my praises of the book end. Because, all right, from now on, I pretty much only have negatives to talk about. The first negative I'll have is that this book's ending is truly mismanaged. Truly mismanaged. The last action sequence of the book happens with almost 50 pages left in the book, and this is a pretty short book. So the last 50 pages basically feel like one long denouement. And it shouldn't feel that way. A Stormlight Archive book, which is 1,400 pages, can afford to have a 50-page or even a 100-page denouement. But a book like Spinneret, which is just over 300 pages, cannot afford to have a 50-page denouement. And as a result, you just feel like, why did I read that? That wasn't that big. That action sequence itself wasn't even that big or as big as it should have been. It starts and ends way too quickly. That should have been much longer, and he should have cut the denouement and actually shifted around the storyline. There is also an element of the characters leave the planet of Astra, which is where the book takes place. The book's about this colony on Astra, this new planet, and they leave that to go somewhere else, and I won't spoil where they go. And it's built up, and logically, as you're reading the book, it makes sense why they went there and why Timothy Zahn had to do this. He kind of built himself into a corner. But the problem is, he doesn't do anything with where they go. It's basically worthless to the story. It kind of introduces a little something, but it really... It basically, what I think that does is that little device that he spends the last 50 pages on sets up a potential sequel, but does nothing to wrap up this story, which is not even close to being wrapped up yet. At the same time, there are big elements of the political nature of this series and the alien nature and the technological nature of this series. All three of those... there was something that needed to be resolved by the end of the book. And all of it is resolved, but it's off the page. You hear about it after the fact, and you're like, that's what we should have been. We shouldn't have been doing this side quest to go over to this new planet. We should have been focusing on these three things and seeing how they resolved. Instead, it just is kind of like all right, let's just wrap this all up. Let's get this done. Boom, 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 boom. It feels like he was on a deadline, and so he just wrote it all really quickly. And so it should not have been like that. The action sequence should have been towards the end, and as part of the action sequence, we should have seen the wrap up of those little plot lines and themes in the book. So the ending was horribly mismanaged, in my opinion. I think that the first act and the second act are actually pretty good. It's just the third act that I think was truly mismanaged. Also, this book has the problem, as you can see from the cover, which I don't have a good cover because mine's beat up. I'm sorry. So instead I'll show. And these mass market paperbacks start peeling after a while. So here I'll show a more accurate cover, better looking cover. There are like a bunch of alien species. I believe I counted 9 in the book. I believe I counted 9 alien species. And for a book this short, there should not have been that many. I think he should have dramatically decreased it to 1 or maybe 2. There should not have been more than 2 in a book this size. And as a result, none of the species are fleshed out. None of them are truly explored a lot. They're all referenced. Oh, the Rooshreich are over here. Oh, the Palms are over here. Oh, the Centricree, they're over here. And there's nothing that's like concrete, and we don't spend a lot of time. We don't even get to know the alien characters. Alien characters are on there for like a page at most, and then they're off. All right, there's literally a scene where the guy comes in, and you're thinking, oh, there's going to be a big showdown. Up, and he's gone in like 2 pages. And I was like, oh. And so this book, it just didn't handle its aliens right, and this book could have been really good with the aliens. The next thing, and probably the last issue I'll talk about in this review, is characters. There are 3 main characters that are introduced in the beginning of the book that are pivotal throughout the book. And there's a 4th one who's like important, but he's not a main character. I'd say he's just a major character. And those characters are used throughout the book, and it's good, and they were necessary. But there is a last character, another major character, who becomes pivotal in the second half of the book, isn't even introduced until the second half of the book, and she's a scientist. I'll give that much away. She's a scientist. She should have been used in the first half. She should have been introduced. They should have spent in a couple more pages introducing her, showing what she was doing on Earth, showing her reacting to, like we should have seen an Earth perspective. We see an Earth perspective from the president and from the UN Secretary General. But they're political leaders, so they're kind of really in the know. It would have been interesting, this scientific character who becomes pivotal later in the book, if we had seen her position on Earth, watching everything unfold and seeing what a layman on Earth was thinking. And she's not even that much of a layman, she's a scientist, but you know what I mean. So instead, she just pops up at the end in the second half of the book, and they just ramp up her storyline. And again, her storyline is one of those things that's finished off the page. And if they had done her storyline on the page and had a beginning with her, I would have felt more connected. Instead, I just felt like, she's just any other character. Like, there's nothing really important about her. So overall, I feel the metaphor I would use for this book is if you had a nice, tasty dish to make. Timothy Zahn had all of the ingredients. He had them all. But he put them in at the wrong times, and he put them in the wrong amounts. And as a result, the dish comes out bland or tasting bad, despite having the correct ingredients. The themes are there, the characters are there, the world-building elements are there. All of this stuff could have made a truly great book, but they were all executed poorly. And I think this goes to show that this was just in a period in his writing career that Timothy Zahn was not used to the writing process as much. And I feel like he just rushed himself in the process of getting this book out so that he could have another science fiction book written so that he could get another paycheck. And also he did things to set up a potential sequel that would never really happen, and he should have just focused on telling a good story here, which is something that Hollywood does a lot right now, of trying to set things up but not telling a good story at the moment. So Timothy Zahn does learn from his mistakes, and some of his future books are truly superb. Manta's Gift, one of the best standalone novels ever, science fiction or otherwise. And we're talking about a series, the Conquerors trilogy is amazing. He just had to get there, and this is unfortunately like a growing pains type book for him. He had to get there. So I give this actually a pretty poor review. It's my only truly negative review of a Timothy Zahn book. I've had several that have been like, I don't like it, I don't dislike it, I don't hate it. Like, it's like a 5 out of 10, some of them. This is the first one that dips below into the bad territory, and I'd give it like a 4 out of 10. Disappointing ending, mismanaged characters, mismanaged alien species. Mismanaged is the best way to describe this book. So that's my review of Spinneret. If you read this book and loved it, that's great. Let me know why you loved it, because I wish I did. If you haven't read this book, have you read other Timothy Zahn books that you're interested in reading? Tell me your thoughts on him as an author, Star Wars or otherwise, his original books, because his original books don't get enough attention. Let me know all that in the comments section down below. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.